نويت صوم غد عن أداء فرض شهر رمضان هذه السنة لله تعالى إيمانا واحتسابا لوجه الله الكريم عز وجل.
أعوذ بالله أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. Night number 26, and subhanallah, really keep pushing, and inshallah, even though it's an even night, remember that any night could be that special night, and inshallah we make the dua that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards us the night that we are at our best. May Allah grant that to be the night in which Allah blesses us with Laylatul Qadr. Ameen. We continue with the biography of the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, the seerah, and we said that now that it's basically the Nabi has peace in the immediate vicinity of Arabia. He started sending letters to the rulers of the world, the most powerful people in the world. They all received letters from the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, and different rulers, depending on how they responded to the letter, wallah, it is how Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had dealt with him. We said the ruler of Egypt, he did not become a Muslim, but he was very respectful. He took the letter and he encased it and he honored it, and he responded with the Nabi in kind. And so the Nabi said, because he honored my letter, his kingdom will be saved. As for Khusru, the emperor of Persia, as he had torn the letter of the Nabi Sallam, the Nabi Sallam said, as he tore my letter up, Allah will tear his kingdom up. And to this day, the historians cannot explain how an empire that survived for more than 1,000 years, which was the pinnacle at that time, disappeared within 7 years, completely dissolved, gone, doesn't exist anymore. Another, perhaps the most interesting letter was to one of the other great man of the world, the emperor of Rome. The Roman emperor was Christian, and their capital was in Istanbul, Constantinople. That was where their capital was, but they ruled much of the Levant, the Syria, Jordan, Palestine. All these were under the Roman rule. And so Heraclius, the ruler of Rome, the Nabi Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam wrote him a letter. And in fact, there's two hadith, we put them together. It mentions here that Heraclius had a dream similar to Fir'aun, where his kingdom is being overtaken by a group of people, and these people circumcise themselves. And so he called his entourage, and he said he's getting this dream, and what do you think we should do? So he said, the only people that circumcise themselves are the Jews, and we have persecuted them a lot, and just give us the command, we will do some more anti-Semitism if you want. And so it was on that day that Dihya al-Kalbi, the Sahabi, comes and gives a letter from the Nabi Sallam, and he realizes that there is a new group of people in Arabia who circumcise themselves, and there is a letter from a man who claims to be a prophet. And it's just so, subhanAllah, the coincidence is, and this is the qadr of Allah, that Heraclius was in a vicinity where Abu Sufyan was as well. Abu Sufyan is not a Muslim yet. And so he called Heraclius, and what's amazing, this hadith is narrated by Abu Sufyan before he's a Muslim. Before he was a Muslim, he's the arch enemy of Nabi Sallam, and Heraclius heard that there is a caravan from Makkah in the vicinity, so he said, call these people here, I need to speak to them. And Abu Sufyan narrates the story. He said, I was called into the palace of Heraclius, and I thought, subhanAllah, this is Muhammad's story has even reached the emperor of Rome. And he said, who of you knows like Muhammad the most, sallallahu alaihi wasallam? And Abu Sufyan said, me. So he said, you come forward, I'm going to ask you questions, the rest of you stay back, and if he lies, show me, and I'm going to punish him. So Abu Sufyan now, he knows he can't tell a lie, he needs to be honest. And so Heraclius starts asking Abu Sufyan a number of questions. He first says to him, this man that claims to be a prophet, do you know his lineage? Is his family a well-known family? So he said, yes, he comes from a very noble family. We know that family. Then he asks him, has anyone in his family claimed to be a prophet before? So he said, no one in our tradition claims to be a prophet. Then he asked, in his family were anyone who claimed to be a king? So he said, no, we don't have kings. Then he asked him, what type of people follow him? So he said, Abu Sufyan says, the slaves and the meek and the low-class people, and not the rich and powerful. And then he asked Abu Sufyan, does this man tell lies? So Abu Sufyan said, and he knows he can't lie. The people are going to snitch on him. So he said, this man hasn't told lies that we know of. And then he says, has he betrayed in his, if he has a treaty with you, has he betrayed? So Abu Sufyan says, no, but we just entered a treaty now with him. Remember Hudaybiyah? And we don't know how he's going to be. So Abu Sufyan says in the hadith, this was the only thing I could put in, that I wanted to put something negative, and that's the only thing I could say. I'm not too sure. Then he said, the people that embraces his religion, do they then leave it? So he said, no. Are they increasing or decreasing? They're increasing. Have you fought battles against him? So he said, yes. Who won? So Abu Sufyan said, sometimes they win and sometimes we win. He meant Uhud. Uhud. And so then Heraclius, this is the emperor of Rome, he says, I'm now going to explain to you the questions I asked. Then he asked him, and what is his religion? His religion. So Abu Sufyan says he calls us to shun our gods and to worship one God, that we stay chaste, we tell the truth, we should not commit zina, we should not kill one another, that we should be united as one brotherhood. And so Heraclius, he nods and he says, the reason these questions I've asked you, because this is, if you look at all the prophets, this is similar, they come from a good family. That and then I asked you, if he had a relative who was a king or a prophet, I thought he might have wanted to revive this. But because it wasn't done before, this is new. This is something completely new. And then he said, I find it strange that a man who does not lie about the dunya would lie about God. It's quite strange. And he said, if you look at all the prophets, like in the Bible, look, Heraclius was actually a Christian, very devout Christian person, that all the followers of the prophets begin with the meek and the mild. And once faith enters their heart, they never leave. And he then says, Abu Sufyan is narrating, that I think this man, we know a prophet is coming, but I didn't think from your people, that Allah would send a prophet from your people. And if he is the prophet, then this land I'm standing on here in Syria, basically Palestine, will belong to him very soon. And I would go to him and wash his feet. Now, there's another hadith which is very interesting, that Heraclius, one of the governors of Heraclius, becomes Muslim many, many years later. He says that Heraclius sent a letter to the Pope, or basically to Rome, to the ulama, to ask him what to do. And so he said, take a letter to ask the Nabi Sallam some questions and send a guy, this guy is called the Tanuhi, right? The man from Tanuch, his name is Tanuhi. Send Tanuhi to go and ask him some questions. So Heraclius says to Tanuhi, go to this man that claims to be a prophet and listen and spend some time with him and ask and listen if he mentions, number one, does he mention the letter he sent to me? Because Heraclius now opens the letter and he reads, and the Nabi's letter was very simple. He said, from Muhammad, the servant of Allah, to Heraclius, the emperor of Rome, Aslim Tuslim. Become a Muslim and be saved. And if you don't, then then the punishment of all your people becomes kafir is upon you. And then he writes the ayah of the Quran, O people of the book, come to a common word between you and us, that we worship one Allah, Allah alone. It's a very simple letter. So he said to the Tanuhi, when you go, listen if he mentions anything about his own letter, number one. Number two, I'm going to give him a letter. In there's a question. The answer has something to do with the night. See if he says anything to do with the night. And then the third thing is there's something funny on his back. Have a look on his back. So this man, the Tanuhi, goes to Medina and he gives the letter of Heraclius to the Nabi Sallam. The Nabi Sallam doesn't open the letter. In fact, he says to the Tanuhi, I sent a letter to your emperor and he hasn't responded yet. And so the Tanuhi, this is one. Heraclius hasn't responded. Now why? There is some law with Allah. Depending on how you respond is how Allah is going to respond to you. Now so far, Heraclius is reserving comment. He's not responding. He hasn't responded. He didn't affirm or reject the Nabi's letter. He didn't disregard it or disrespect it like the emperor of Persia. So he said, I'm still waiting for how he's going to treat my letter. Number two, he opens up Heraclius' letter, and Heraclius writes there that your Quran says that there is a Jannah, a paradise, that is bigger than the heavens and the earth. If that's how big Jannah is, then where is Jahannam? Where's Jahannam? So the Nabi Sallam said, tell me, where does the day go when it's nighttime? Or where does the night go when it's daytime? Right? So that's number two. And then Tanuhi spent a few days in Medina, couldn't get a chance to see the Nabi Sallam's that mark on his back, and he was about to leave when the Nabi said, come back Tanuhi, aren't you supposed to look at my back? And so this Tanuhi embraced Islam, and he goes to Heraclius and he becomes Muslim. Now it's amazing because one of the governors who was in there, he said, Heraclius called us to a meeting. And he said, I've received a letter from a man who is a prophet, and I believe this is the prophet, and if we want to be saved, we need to follow him. And the entire Jama'ah became crazy and said, we will reject you and we will never, and it became a ruckus. And he said, wait, stop. So this was all a test. I wanted to see if you were on your faith, and we are going to oppose this man. And so, subhanAllah, as Abu Sufyan then says, he, having met Heraclius, and Heraclius said that very soon, this land that I'm on in Palestine will belong to him, and subhanAllah, we know that is going to happen. And tonight, inshallah, we talk about the first battle between the Muslims and the Romans. Now, before, the fights between the Arabs, between the Nabi Sallam and the Quraysh are small, tribal. Now, the Nabi Sallam is going up against perhaps the most powerful empire, or the second most powerful empire in the world, the Romans. And this battle is called the Battle of MUTAH, or as the Sahaba called it, a Jaysh al-Umara, the army of the generals, because there's a number of generals in here. What happened? How did this battle occur? The Nabi Sallam sent another letter to one of the Arab tribes who were Christian. So between the Romans and Nabi Sallam are Arabs who are Christian. they aligned to Heraclius. And so they were in Jordan area. The Nabi had sent a Sahabi with a letter to one of their chieftains. This man was so arrogant and rude. Not only did he reject the letter, but he took the Sahabi, the ambassador, and he tortured him to death. Now, we don't do that. You don't torture an ambassador. So for this, when the Nabi heard the news, he said, this must be responded to. This is an act of war. And so he calls a volunteer army. Whoever wishes to join, this is not compulsory. Whoever wants to join, we're going to go to the land of the Romans, and this is the first international battle. And 3,000 Sahaba sign up for this army. And the Nabi Sallam then did something which he himself wasn't part of the battle. He said, I'm going to appoint 3 generals. The first one, Zayd ibn Haritha, the adopted son of Nabi Sallam. We all know Zayd by now. Okay. Number 2, after Zayd, Ja'far ibn Abi Talib, who came from Abyssinia, his cousin, Sayyidina Ali's brother. And number 3, Abdullah ibn Rawaha was one of the chiefs of the Ansar. So 2 Muhajireens and the Ansar. And they're about to leave. The Nabi Sallam is giving them, praising them, and he walks with them as they leave Medina. Abdullah ibn Rawaha, radiallahu anh, the 3rd general, he was known to recite poetry. He was a poet. And as the army is about to leave Medina, one person makes dua and says, may Allah return you safely. And Abdullah ibn Rawaha says, Ameen. But as for me, I make dua, Allah is not going to bring me back safely. I want to die a shaheed. And he is versifying poetry of how our destination is Jannah and we are ready to die. Now this is important. He is now hyping up the army. With him is an orphan who he adopted. And eventually the orphan, this boy that's with him, starts crying. And Abdullah ibn Rawaha says, why are you crying? He said, you're making it so known that you intend to die. I'm sad. So he says to the boy, Abdullah ibn Rawaha, why are you sad? Look at us, we're sharing this camel, you and me. If I get what I want is Jannah, and if I die, you're going to get the camel all for yourself when we get home. So both of us win. Don't be so upset. And the army goes and they reach the land of the Roman land. And on the way, it's a lot of hostile territory. They get attacked by many villages. Then the news reaches them. The news reaches them that a huge army from the Romans had heard of them coming and consolidated in one place more than they had expected. See, the Muslims expected they were only going to fight one tribe. But when the news came, these tribes, all the Christian tribes, banded together. And in the books, not our books, in the books of the Romans, the brother of Heraclius was in the area. He sent a Roman legion. Now, this is a proper army. The Sahaba are not fighting. They're not soldiers. They're not paid soldiers. These are farmers that are fighting. But the Roman army is a paid army, weapons and everything. And so the news reaches the Sahaba that a huge army has amassed. This army must, and the books of, our books exaggerate sometimes. I mean, all books, 100,000, 200,000 now. The Muslims are 3,000. What we do know, the Muslims were outnumbered at maybe 10 to 1. That is the extent of the odds. Because it was such a huge number that the Muslims had to stop and Zayd had to make mashura. So Zayd radiallahu anh, he asked, what should we do? And his opinion, Zayd's opinion, we should go and fight. And so he asked Abdullah ibn Rawaha. Now, Abdullah ibn Rawaha has been talking about shaheed and going to Jannah, and he's the poet. He says, you get up and you tell us what you should do. And he makes a beautiful speech, Abdullah ibn Rawaha. He says, guys, the thing that you are scared about, you're hesitating, is right in front of you. You all want to go to Jannah, isn't it? Well, there's your Jannah. And do we not know that Allah promised us one of 2 outcomes, either Jannah or victory? You only have those 2 options. And then he says, remember, Allah does not, we do not win by numbers or power, but it's iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And so he gives a very rousing speech that everyone says that let us go forward and let us fight. Abu Hurairah radiallahu anh, this is the first battle that Abu Hurairah is in the army, and he's shocked when he sees this number. And the Sahaba said to him, you were not there with us on Badr. We were also outnumbered 3 to 1. And look at this now. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is going to give victory. It's amazing. The Sahaba have no doubts in their mind. They're going to win this battle. It doesn't matter about the odds. We are going to win. And so the battle begins. And what's amazing, 700 kilometers away in Medina, the Nabi was calling the Sahaba and he said, I'm going to give you a live update for what's happening. And so Aisha is in the room, she's watching. Anas radiallahu anh, he's obviously too young to go to the battle. He said, we are. And the Nabi was explaining. And he said, the battle begins. And Zayd ibn Haritha, he has the banner that I gave him. And he plunges he leads from the front. And he fights a severe fighting. And eventually Zayd is martyred. And this noticeably impacted the Nabi. This is his son. This is the adopted son, that the tears begin to shed. But the banner just falls for a moment on the ground when Ja'far picks up the banner. And Ja'far, subhanAllah, this is perhaps one of the most brutal assault that you have in all the history of the seerah, where Ja'far radiallahu anh is surrounded by almost a battalion of Romans, and he is stabbed from the front, from the back. His right hand is cut off, and he holds the flag with his left, and he continues to fight on until he's basically cut in half. Later on, when they found his body, Abdullah ibn Umar, Sayyidina Umar's son, said, we counted 90 wounds on Ja'far's body, 50 in the front, 40 in the back. The flag falls, and now it's the turn of Abdullah ibn Rawaha, the one who had been giving all the poetry and encouraging it. And he sees basically Ja'far and Zayd being chopped quickly, like to pieces, and he hesitates for a minute. And he writes, and he says this beautiful poetry, and it's recorded here. He says, I swear by Allah, he says to himself, oh my soul, look at you as if what are you afraid of? And why do you think so highly of yourself? You are just some, sexual fluid in a bag, and Jannah is in front of you. If you are not going to go, I'm going to force you to go. Oh my soul, what is it that you are hesitating? Now go, so go ahead. For if you follow these two shuhada, the two generals, then Allah will guide you to paradise. And that moment, and it must have shown you how severe this fighting was, that he had paused, but he gets the flag, and he charges into, obviously, what is certain death, and he fights as much as he could until he is also made a shaheed, and the flag falls, this time for a longer time. In Medina, Aisha says the Nabi Sallam had to sit down when he saw Zayd dying, then Ja'far dying, then Abdullah ibn Rawaha dying. He sat down, and the tears are flowing. And now there is chaos in the ranks of the Muslims. They had never experienced, onslaught like this. And so one of the Sahaba grabs up the flag, and a huddle comes around him to try and protect him. And he says, take the flag, someone take the flag. They said, why don't you keep the flag? So he said, no, not me. You choose someone to be the commander. And they said, who should be the? And they point to the newest convert, the person who just became a Muslim not even a month or two ago, Khalid ibn Walid radiallahu anh. And they said, you take the flag, Khalid. He says, how can I take the flag? I'm not amongst you, I'm not an elite one. He said, no, we know you know how to use the battle, how to fight, you are a general. And this would begin the career. From this point on is the beginning of the career of the greatest general in Islam. And so Khalid ibn Walid takes the flag, and immediately he, instead of retreating, he makes a counter attack, which he runs forward. And he says, this is Khalid in his own words, on that day I broke 9 swords. I fought until 9 swords of my own were broken, and we had a severe counter attack on the Romans that they were forced to give us some space. Then the night came, and Khalid ibn Walid very strategically, he sent his cavalry to run throughout the desert as if the reinforcements are coming in. And he said, make takbir, make it loud. So the Romans are thinking that these people are being reinforced during the night. And he swapped his flanks. Now, like in soccer or rugby, you mark a specific person. That's the guy I'm going to fight. So when you wake up the morning and you see all new faces, it appears like these people really had a massive reinforcements. And the Muslims fight on, and eventually the Romans back off, and this allows the Muslims also time to back off. And Khalid announces, we let us retreat and go back to Medina. And they accept, and they go back to Medina. While they're in Medina, of course, the Nabi Sallam is severely traumatized, and he's crying at what he is seeing of what's happening in the battle. And because the Nabi Sallam informs them that the army has returned, or it's on its way back, this is really the first time that the Muslims had really retreated. You didn't have a retreat like this. And so when they get to Medina, some of the people of Medina started mentioning to them as they entered, oh, you have fled from Allah. Why didn't you stand and become a shaheed? And so the Nabi Sallallahu then said, don't say this. And he gave this beautiful hadith, which is in Bukhari. He said, first Zayd took the flag and was martyred. Then Ja'far took it and he was martyred. Then Abdullah ibn Rawaha took it and he was martyred. Then the flag was taken by Sayfullah, the sword from amongst the swords of Allah. And Allah had given them victory through Khalid. That they have not fled, but they returned back to fight again. And this would be the first battle of many in which Khalid radiallahu anhu would really give it to the Romans. And subhanAllah, at this point also, the family of Ja'far, we spoke about Asma bint Umays, the lady, Ja'far's wife, and she had many young children. She was hysterical. She was hysterical when she heard that Ja'far had died. And it's such a beautiful hadith this time that Aisha is now watching the Nabi Sallam give this update, and he's crying as he is telling how the Sahaba had died at MUTAH. And a man comes to the Nabi Sallam and said, the ladies, the family of Ja'far are wailing. They are making niyaha, they are going beyond. So the Nabi Sallam says to him, just tell them to stop. And he goes and he comes back. They don't want to stop. He says, go tell them to stop. And back and forth. And eventually the Nabi Sallam says, then put dust in their face, meaning then just leave them. And as the man goes, Aisha says to the man, Rather, dust should be put in your face. Like, what's wrong with you? Now is not the time. Look at how sad the Nabi is, and you're coming with these small things. 3 days later, the Nabi goes to Ja'far's house, and he says, now, no longer, no more wailing for my brother. My brother is in Jannah, and Allah has replaced his 2 arms with wings. And he saw the children were all disheveled, so he said, come, bring a barber, cut their hair, and he spoke to each one. He said, you look like your grandfather Abu Talib, you look like your father Ja'far, and Ja'far resembles me. And the Nabi spoke to each one of those children and made dua, may Allah bless you and Allah grant you a long life. And then his wife said, what's going to come of these children? So the Nabi said to Asma, don't worry, these are mine. I will personally take care of them. They are my family, and I will make sure they are always cared for. Not too long afterwards, Asma bint Umays, her iddah was done. And then she got a proposal. Sayyidina Abu Bakr proposed to her. And she married Sayyidina Abu Bakr. And of course, Abu Bakr was much older than her. And he would live a few more years and then he would die. Let's continue the story on a nice note. After Abu Bakr, so she married Ja'far. Then Ja'far died at MUTAH. Then she married Abu Bakr. And Abu Bakr radiallahu died, passed away. Then she married Sayyidina Ali, Ja'far's brother. And so, the children of Abu Bakr, she had a son with Abu Bakr and a son with Ja'far. They started like debating whose father was better. Was my father Ja'far better, or was your father Abu Bakr better? So Sayyidina Ali said, I know the right person to be the judge. Your mom, she knows both of those men very well. Let her be the judge. Who was the better man? And so Asma said, as for the young men, then there was no better young man than Ja'far. And as for the shuyukh, the older men, then there's no better Sheikh than Abu Bakr. So Sayyidina Ali said, what about me? Where do I fit in? Right? I don't get anything. And so subhanAllah, this, as we said, this was the beginning, the first battle. But as the Nabi says that they have returned and they will fight again, we know that the same Khalid ibn Walid would come back in a span of 6-7 years, and Jerusalem, Syria, Damascus, Jordan would all fall by the grace of Allah under Saifullah, inshaAllah. And if we get there, bi'idhnillah, inshaAllah. We continue, just remind us about the question of last night. Which of the 2 wives did the Nabi Sallallahu Allah reference in Surah Al-Tahrim? Of course, Aisha and Hafsa. And tonight's question, how many Muslim commanders were martyred in the Battle of MU'TAH? The clue for the crossword, number 6 across the surah with 2 basmalas. Which surah has 2 bismillahs in it? Okay? That's surah, 1 surah, inshallah. Shukran so much. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.